42 veterans are taking their lives daily due to PTSD, anxiety, depression, traumatic injuries, and traumatic brain injuries. In 2016, more than 2 million Americans had an addiction to prescription or illicit opioids, and nearly 175 Americans died from drug overdose per day that same year. In October of 2017, an opioid crisis was declared a national public health emergency. Drug overdose is now the leading cause of injury death in the United States. Today's guest, Curtis Brown, is a disabled Persian Gulf War veteran, radio show host of Battlefield Connections, speaker and author of his new book, God is Bigger. Curtis was traumatically injured while serving our country in the Persian Gulf War, which later resulted in 15 surgeries, PTSD, chemical exposure, addiction to narcotics, and psychotropic medications. This is his story. Welcome to the Valarie Hurst Show. Thank you for joining us today. My guest is Curtis Brown. And Curtis, I am so excited to have you here. I know we've been looking forward to this day for several months now, so I'm so glad you're here.
It's an honor to be here, Valarie, and yes, we have. We've been waiting patiently for several months, and it's amazing to see this day come.
Yes, it really is. Well, I want to dive right in and just really take the audience on a journey of your story. And you shared with us in your book how you not only were dealing with the physical, the mental, and the emotional anguish from the injuries, but you were also struggling with the mental and emotional anguish you endured from childhood abuse. And I'm quoting from your book, "I literally became the very things I hated the most in my dad as I was growing up." Can you tell us a little bit about that?
When I made that quote, I was sitting with my wife as I was writing that part, and she'd made the statement, she goes, "So many times you become a reflection of your dad." And when I came to that point in the book, I had to share that, you know what, I have to take accountability for the things I did. I can't just continually just pass them off to my dad and say it's all your fault, because I made the choice to take the medications to begin with, just like my dad dealt with a tremendous amount of addiction. And so when I came to that point in life of learning that to be able to forgive, first we have to realize, what am I really asking for forgiveness for? Right. And for everybody out there listening, we have to take accountability for the choices we make in life.
Sure.
And so I had to write that down because I did become even more than what my dad became.
Yeah.
And it hurt because I never wanted to become my dad. But we mimic a lot of what we surround ourselves with.
That's so true. Yeah, that's so true. We mimic the environment that we were raised in, and sometimes it's not always the most healthy environment, but you know, we learn and we grow from those things.
Right.
And
one thing I can say about my father is one of the last few things I heard him say is, "Son, please forgive me for the things I've done."
wow.
And I had to make that choice to forgive. But supernaturally, because of my relationship with Christ, I was able to do that.
Yeah. Can you help people understand how the abuse from your father and the pains of war did not force you to make the destructive choices you made in life?
That's a good question. To elaborate on that, once again, it comes back to I have to make my own choices to move forward. And whether it's in war, whether it's the abusive situation in life with my father. For instance, I made the choice to walk away from my scholarships, which then I had to make a choice to get my college money back again. So I made the choice to join the Army. So I wasn't a victim.
Right.
If I was a victim of all, it was of my own choices. Not that somebody else put me in that situation. So it comes back to accountability and dealing with yourself to where, okay, I can't pass it off on my father for my choices, the
Right.
choices I made.
Mm-hmm.
Realistically, we should be learning from the mistakes of others. And I tell that to my son. My wife tells that to my son. And she tells it to me too. You know? So it's like the old vicious cycle of the true definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting a different result. Well,
That's
that
true.
different result wasn't coming. And it wasn't because of Dad. It wasn't because of the Army. Because I made the choice to join the Army. I made the choice to mimic my father,
Yeah.
my earthly father.
Right, right. You know, sometimes, you know, we get stuck in those cycles and patterns. And it's easier to say, you know, well, you know, I can blame this person or that person, but it was a conscious choice that you made.
Right.
It was a conscious choice that you made.
And ultimately, we have to make a choice to choose the life we want to live or the life that God is offering us. And that's a huge choice,
Yeah.
but it's the most important.
Right.
And that's what rocked my world and changed my whole perspective.
Love it. You went many years believing you had messed up so bad that you couldn't be forgiven for all of the poor choices you said that you made. So tell us about the pivotal aha moment that transpired in 2005 that caused you to believe otherwise.
I tried to take my own life. And yes, I was down at that low point thinking I'd messed up so bad that God couldn't and wouldn't have anything to do with me anymore. And I thought I was alone.
Yeah.
I didn't realize there were 22 soldiers taking their life every day.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that people were addicted to opiates and didn't know how to get out of it, and so ashamed that they didn't know how to express themselves because of the shame they were afraid to
Right.
come out and say, I've got a problem. And I can remember my older brother coming in and finding me on the floor. I couldn't get up. And he just, in his own way of compassion, he was yelling at me, get up, get up, get up. You know, you're about to die. And I was at that place I wanted to. And this was the second go around. And my first marriage was just, it was at the end. And so prior to that, I'd already been in Waco for trying to take my own life at the VA facility in Waco.
Okay.
Because I didn't understand what I was going through. I didn't understand. In reality, I was trying to cover up the physical, the spiritual, and the emotional pain.
Right.
And I was tired because I was going on my own strength.
Yeah.
And so I had to come to a point to where when the divorce was final, and in that rejection from my first wife and that pushing away and that separation, I finally realized, you know, God, if you're really real, and it had all these years that I had dealt with, you know, going to church, growing up in church, and believing that I knew the Lord. But it's like I told my students recently, I said the difference between an acquaintance and a relationship. And God, I think of all the disciples in the boat when Jesus was sleeping. And when that storm hit, just like that emotional, physical, spiritual storm with me going through a divorce and dealing with addiction, when that storm hit, I was like, God, where are you at?
Right.
And I felt like those disciples in the boat. Here Jesus is sleeping in the middle of that storm. And because I'd always had this acquaintance with Jesus, you know, reintroducing himself when I felt I needed to go to church. And then this real big storm hits. And he stands up and he looks at me and goes, where's your faith? You know, it was just speaking to my heart.
Yeah.
Where's your faith? And then I think of the disciples when he looked up and he said, peace, be still. And the storm stops.
Yeah.
And then they realized he's more than just a man. This is God in the flesh. And through that storm in life, God revealed himself to me because I was hungry. I wanted answers. Deep inside, I wanted to live.
Yeah.
And I remember my sister Carla came up to me and she goes, remember all those dreams you had when you were little?
Yeah.
God never changed his mind about you.
Right.
You changed yours about him.
That's so good.
And
yeah.
God started changing my life then. And that's the day, February 14th, 2005.
Wow.
On Valentine's Day, and I was so rejected from my first wife. And I don't hold that against her
Sure.
at all.
Yeah.
Because the choices I'd made, everybody else had to go through the consequences with me. But then I made a choice to say, God, whatever you want.
Yeah.
I'm going to take you at your word. And like my oldest brother who just went to be with the Lord,
Right.
he always told me, if you want to hear from God, as if this was a Bible, you have to open his mouth. And I'll never forget that from my oldest brother, Jerry.
Yeah. I know he's proud of you.
They're not into volume, they're into quality. And that's what really sold us on making that selection. That's what we found throughout the entire process.
Having been in the pool industry for over 30 years in a major market, we have the big town experience, but the small town integrity.
You've earned your place in the sun with the Minion Pool Group.
Hi, I'm Kim Bowling with the Mary and Frankie team at Keller Williams. I want to share with you today my listing in Teeswood. Teeswood is a prestigious gated community in the beautiful area of Conroe. Located near our 22,000-acre Lake Conroe, minutes to I-45, hospitals, shopping, and just 20 minutes to the Woodlands. Teeswood has very exquisite homes with curb appeal and elegance built within a backdrop of natural streams, private lakes, rolling hills, and mature pine trees. Featured today is 10286 Paradise Valley, a stunning custom home on 1.27 private wooded acres. This is a 4 to 5 bedroom home, study, game room, and 5.5 baths. Circle driveway with extended, widened driveway along the side of the home by the 3-car garage for additional parking. The grand covered patio has plenty of space for a custom pool, full outdoor California kitchen. Large back entertaining area has a wood ceiling over the slate patio along the back of the home. If you're thinking about Teeswood, talk to Kim. Teeswood listings can be viewed online. To see more high-quality photos, property details, and pricing, go to talktokim.com. To set your private showing for any Teeswood property, call me direct. I would love to show you around.
Curtis, how did you overcome the grip of addiction that it had on you?
First of all, I'm going to say my wife's Minnie, and my son Micah's. Heather and Micah prayed for me and prayed for me and prayed for me. And it was interesting because I had this certain mindset about innovative medicine, natural, homeopathic, and I had that witchcraft, mindset of thinking, no, it ain't,
Right.
It's not going to work. And so when I came to the point to where my marriage was falling apart, and my wife and I were separated for a year and a half.
Okay.
And we were within 2 weeks of finalizing a divorce.
Wow.
She never filed. I filed because the opiates and the psych meds literally took my ability to reason away. And that's what they do. And so without the ability to reason, you can't communicate. You can't feel the emotion that, I know we shouldn't live life off of emotions, but God gave us healthy emotions for a reason.
Exactly.
So, but I didn't have the emotions at all anymore. I couldn't cry. If there was any emotion, all it would be anger and outburst.
Okay.
Because the lack of reasoning, the anger and outburst, and she had become my enemy. My wife and son had become my enemy in my eyes. And a lot of people were. Anybody that would speak against opiates, the medicines you're taking, you're just not who you were, and then that defense mode. I mean, I would just snap right into defense mode without even realizing what I was doing. So, but to go back to the question, my wife kept reintroducing this thought, hey, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? All natural means, chiropractors, acupuncture, even, essential oils,
Right.
things like that. Just natural herbs. And though she may not have realized it at the time, God was using it to plant those seeds in my mind. But here we go back to 2 weeks before finalizing a divorce. Her and Micah never quit praying. And we just sold our big house in Northeast Texas. I was living in a small one that we had next door. And Micah was there for spring break. And about 3/4 of the way into spring break, God had just really been dealing with my heart. He said, you need to go to detox. And so I made a few calls before I said anything to Micah. And I called the VA. And unfortunately, the VA said, if you'll come here for 45 days, hit Shreveport, we will put you on methadone and we'll help you get off of this. Well, I knew what methadone was. It's a synthetic heroin. And so I went back, and God just took me back in time to when I was only taking half the dose of methadone the VA was giving me for pain management when my spine was fractured and my neck was fractured.
Wow.
And how my wife would say, you're only taking half the dose and all you're doing is sitting here drooling. And I said, no, I can't do that. You have any other options? No, we don't have any other options, Mr. Brown. So I called a treatment center in East Texas, in near Tyler, and they made the comment to me, just come on in. We will work with whatever insurance you have, and just come on in. And so then I looked at Micah and I said, son, you got to go back early to mom. And he was upset. He was broken. He goes, Dad, I hardly ever get to see you. And I could understand that. He goes, and you and Mom are about to finalize this divorce, and I won't ever get to hardly ever get to see you at all. You're up here and we're in Houston. Because unfortunately, because of the addiction, my wife was having to stay in one bedroom with my son at my mother-in-law's house in Sugar Land. That's the consequences they were paying because of my choice. But they never gave up. She didn't want the divorce. And, well, I told my son this. I said, he goes, well, why am I having to go back? And I said, well, God's tugging at Daddy's heart, and I got to go to detox. I got to do something different. And Mike just grabs me and holds me. And he says he doesn't even really remember what he said, but he looks at me, and here's an 8-year-old boy looking at his daddy and said, I knew Jesus was going to put my mom and daddy back together. And I went to this detox, and it was a 3-day, or it could have been however long they needed, but God had me out of there in 3 days. But they allowed me to get a note from my wife. And here's a lady that we're 2 weeks out from finalizing a divorce. And my wife leaves, they let me read this note from her. In the exact words my wife puts on this note it wasn't, I've been telling you for how long you need to do this. I told you so, or it wasn't anything like that. It was, I am so excited to see what God's going to do because of your obedience.
She didn't give up on you.
No. She goes, I called my attorney and said, you just stop it.
Wow.
She goes, now you have the choice to make you have a choice to make. Of course, I called my attorney and said, stop it. And I went to a chiropractor when I got out. And it happened to be that God provided right there in that little town of Henderson, Texas. Dr. Sasha Cakeman has become a dear, close friend of mine that said, I do acupuncture. Let me just work with you. And it started working. It started helping with the anxiety. It started helping with the PTSD. It started helping relieve these things from this addiction. And then he started getting me on supplements, herbs and things that were natural. And GABA, which one thing that like Ativan or Xanax, it gives you a synthetic GABA in your brain. And so, but there's natural GABA that has no addictive qualities. It encourages your brain to start producing the serotonin again and the GABA on its own.
Right.
And so you can buy that along with 5-HTP, which these are the things my wife's been telling me about all this time, but my ears weren't open.
Yeah. How long did it take you to fully heal? And during that process, when you and your wife were separated, did you feel that you needed for the healing process?
It took me, my wife and I had it was like another courtship, getting to know each other again, and her building that trust with her that, this is really the direction I'm going now. And so I would say it took about 6 months. I started having to change my diet. Of course, you guys probably won't know that by now because my diet has kind of reverted back to pizza a little bit too much and Mexican food. That's all right. But but changing my diet,
Okay.
taking natural supplements, good natural supplements that are effective. Like I would take GABA, I would take magnesium. That's another thing that a lot of the psychotropic meds they have you on, it depletes your body of magnesium, which also stops your brain function, along with causing spasms throughout your body.
Wow.
And people don't know these things.
There's
And
so many options.
So
There's
I
so
started
many.
taking magnesium, natural supplements, the GABA. I would take the 5-HTP, but then as my body started detoxing itself, of getting off the opiates, getting the opiates out of my system, out of my brain. It takes about 9 months to get it all out of your brain, any kind of drug.
Absolutely.
So don't give up. Just know
Right.
that it's a process.
Right.
And just continually get yourself into a habit of trying to eat healthy. So eventually, once your body and your mind clear up, you'll be able to eat a normal diet. You won't have to take so many supplements because the healing process is it's starting to complete itself.
Right. At least, would you say a full year?
At least a full year.
Because, you know, I think what today with just the opioid crisis we have, that the rehab facilities, it's like a perfect business model because, you know, they just keep going back in and keep going back in.
Right.
Just reoccurring, you know, drug addiction problems with the younger generation. So, you know, can you talk a little bit about that as far as, you know, just how it altered your thinking and just kind of expand on that a little bit?
Well, my thinking process, we go back to, again, my wife was an enemy to me. She said that anything that she said, it didn't matter what tone of voice, what context, what time of the day, I had a defense up. You know, I was ready to go into battle. And so I had to start retraining myself there.
I see.
And so even with the military background and being in the Army and being through war, I had to start learning how to learn to relax that, you know what, she's not out to get me.
Right.
My son's not out to get me. People aren't out to get me. They really want to help me.
Right.
And that's where it had to change my mindset. But I had to get the fog out of my mind. And that's a process. And it takes a support system.
Sure.
You know, I know that Celebrate Recovery is a great support system. I work with, I call him Big George Schaefer. He's out of Edmond, Oklahoma. He has STORM, S.T.O.R.M. He helps people get into legitimate facilities that you were talking to that became this business, almost like a business, money-making business.
Right.
But George gets people into a legitimate place to help them in the recovery process.
Curtis, if you were given an opportunity to be a part of making changes to legislation concerning the opioid crisis, addiction, and treatment, what changes would you make?
That's a great question. First of all, I would see that people will be educated in the medications that they're taking. So many times, I was one of these that were guilty of this. You get the information of the possible side effects, and what do? We wad them up and we throw them in the garbage.
True.
That people literally need to take a class on the medication they're taking, the side effects it has. And if they're married, I think that the couples need to take that. So they can, at least one of them will come with their eyes open. That this could be a reality for your life. And it doesn't just affect the individual, it affects the family and society as a whole.
Right.
And then I would challenge insurance companies to open up the avenue to be able to offer alternative medicines, alternative treatments, to where the payee would have the opportunity to try a different avenue.
Yeah.
I think that's important because it's worked for me. It's changed my life. My neck is 98% titanium.
Yeah.
My lumbar spine had several operations on it too. I take nothing. I haven't taken it for 3 years. Well, people can't afford just to go out there and say, well, I want to go to a homeopathic doctor, I want to go to a naturopath,
Right.
and because insurance doesn't cover it.
Exactly.
And so I would encourage legislators to include this in their insurance policies, that they can have that option. For instance, acupuncture. The VA pays for my acupuncture now outside the VA system because of they've seen that the treatment they gave me for 18 years and the 18 years of addiction of strong meds. We're talking morphine, methadone, fentanyl, Soma, and then,
Those are
Xanax, all these the psych drugs along with the strong opiate drugs
Yeah.
that they had me on for all these years. And they weren't working. They were destroying me. And if it's destroying me, it's destroying my family. If it's destroying my family, it's affecting society.
Right.
So we got to come back to what alternatives can we have? Innovative medicine to offer people that opportunity to be able to go get muscle massage therapy, that it'll be included in their insurance policy, acupuncture, homeopathic medicine. If it works for them, great. So that's what I would really introduce into legislation.
Perfect. I love it. Well, I just want to thank the audience for watching today. If you are struggling with abuse, addiction, PTSD, divorce, or despair, be sure to get a copy of Curtis's book, God is Bigger, by going to curtisbrown.org.